I think like collectively, maybe as the subculture of herbalism, we just kind of like throw the word self-taught out, because again, it's just kind of based in an egoic, slightly hierarchical way, and really like I'm learning from everyone around me. Like, are you not? Like, everyone is my teacher. Yeah.
Or everything is your teacher, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Herbal Radio is brought to you by Mountain Rose Herbs. Mountain Rose Herbs is committed to putting people, plants, and planet before profit. They work hand in hand with farm partners to provide the highest quality organic herbs, spices, extracts, teas, essential oils, and DIY ingredients. Mountain Rose Herbs is proud to be independently owned and operated here in Eugene, Oregon. Please visit mountainroseherbs.com for all your wellness needs. And now, on with the show. This week's episode features Maureen Judith, founder of Voura, an earth-centered Spagyrics company. Voura aims to contribute to a greater shift where healing is not just personal, but planetary. This is part 2 of a 2-part series, so make sure to go back to part 1 if you missed it.
Okay, we're back. Part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
We decided to call this Mo Mondays.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I'm here for it.
Every Monday you can just come on and explain some science to us.
Yeah, I'll definitely do my best.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Well, I think that, we wrapped up the first part and realizing that there was so much more that we wanted to talk about. And so much more that could be explained. So I'm excited to have you back on, and thank you so much for taking the time. I mean, this is amazing. So maybe we can kind of just start with recap a little bit and then go back into. Yeah,
I think, it was a while ago since we recorded, so I don't actually really remember everything I said, but like just kind of like recapping that, like, it's actually an incredibly new philosophy that everything around us is dead, essentially. And just to kind of like recap, in order for one to like burn a witch at the stake, they had to initially deny the witch their intimacy to the more than human world. Not that it didn't exist, because if it didn't exist, they probably wouldn't have burned them. So just like recapping that, for me, the conversation about spagyrics, sometimes it goes to a very like European lens, and it feels really important to me to talk about the fact that spagyrics are not this like Western invention. When we talk about spagyrics, we're kind of situating it into a larger earth-based chemistry, understanding that, it's not about resurrecting this European occultism, but really it's about acknowledging that the ways in which we understood chemistry initially was that everything around us was alive. Even the word matter, coming from the word materia, which originally meant mother. So how different is it now that we use that word to just kind of represent like this dead thing to be manipulated for a function. Mm-hmm. But in general, alchemical preparations are used in cultures throughout the world. And it feels really important to acknowledge that, people are using plant ash as like a primary component to spagyrics. People are using plant ash in so many different cultures. Like in Ayurveda, they use basmas. That's like a sacred calcined ash of a plant. Or like in Africa or different cultures in North America, they'll add like ash into food. There's different Dene cultures here in the Southwest that add juniper ash to their fry bed recipes. And like the carbonates in that ash is then responding to the organic acids in the fermentation process. And like even like Mesoamerican practices of like taking corn and soaking it in lime and ash water kind of like unlocks niacin. And these are all forms of alchemical preparations, basically. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So in that way, it's actually like it's this incredible ancestral heritage in which we all have access to.
Yeah. And obviously they didn't have the science behind that when they started that practice. Do we have an understanding anthropologically why they were doing what they were doing?
Well, how about I break down kind of just like Spagyrics and then like the alchemical terms that they were putting to that, essentially.
Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So like breaking down the word spagyric, as far as I understand it, it's like two Greek words that was put together, meaning like speo and agirio, meaning to separate and to recombine. And that's kind of really a lot of what you're doing in spagyrics in general. And so that separation they would see as the Tri Prima. And so that's sulfur, mercury, and salt. So these are just old alchemical terms that now we have chemistry terms for. Mm-hmm. So like sulfur, for example, or the soul of a plant is like the essential oils of a plant. So it's like the VOCs. It's like how a plant communicates. It's like a really sacred substance that's not found in abundance in plants. Mm-hmm. And then like the mercury or the spirit is the liquor. It's like the ethyl alcohol of a plant. So that's why, like, if you go to old liquor stores, there'll be like spirit shops. It's just like an old alchemical term. Sure. Or the salt of a plant would be like the body of the plant. So usually if you were to make like an incredible like macerated tincture and then you strain it and you remove that body of the plant and you like compost it or be rid of it in the way that you would. In spagyrics, you're like kind of just getting started at that point. You would like take that body of the plant and then calcine it into a really fine ash and then basically extract a salt from it and then combine those back together again. And so like the difference there is that in botanical tinctures, like your usual tinctures, you're really inside of those, you're getting like organic acids, like the alcohol soluble constituents, right? But in spagyrics, you're getting a triple extract. You're getting a much wider range of extraction that takes place. And so one is not better than the other. They are just very different. Like a lot of things happen when you subsequent your plant material to new environments. And by new environment, I mean like you do like a process of fermentation, you do a process of distillation, you do a process of calcination. So you're creating a new environment for that plant to be in, and from those new conditions, new compounds are created, essentially. And then those compounds, then react with other compounds. So like, when you make a spagyric tincture, what you're doing is you're adding that salt that you pull back to the macerated tincture. And quite a few things happen when you do that. I don't believe that you need to know a lot about phytochemistry to be like an amazing spagyrist. But like, it's important to know that like when you're adding that salt back in, that salt is slightly alkaline, like on a pH scale, and most tinctures are slightly acidic. So you're shifting your tinctures into like a gentle alkalinity when you do that, which affects like how your body absorbs it. It affects compounds. Like a lot of things will happen, like polymerization will happen, which is like where plant phenols oxidize and they link together into larger molecules in the presence of these mineral salts.
Sure. Yeah.
So this will cause like a deeper color. So spagyrics are often like a much darker hue, or like a stabilization of compounds, or new compounds form, like carboxylic acid salts will form, which sounds really technical, right? Using these terms, but like really it's just a natural way that your body absorbs and handles minerals. Esterification will happen. It's like when organic acids and alcohol connect, they create esters. And like really what happens in spagyrics is that there's just an increased solubility and bioavailability because of the enhanced extraction methods. And in that way, your body can also absorb some of these compounds more easily. Like alkaloids turn to alkaloid salts, which cross like the gut barrier more easily. So it's a really it's a big topic. And you don't, you don't have to approach it in such a chemistry based way. Like if you've ever sat in like a class of mine and like you're listening to this podcast, like you know that like I preach that you can do this in your kitchen. Mm-hmm. Like most people are. Like the language itself of spagyrics can sound really intimidating. It's like volatilization, distillation, crystallation, calcination. But like the truth is most people are like doing this in their home in some way or have seen it.
Right.
Sourdough is fermentation. Like if you've ever made soup and you like pull the lid off of the pot and all that water at the top runs off, like that's distillation. That's the earliest form of distillation. And then like if you sit by a fire, that's calcination. But yeah, it's a big conversation.
Well, and I think that I want to go back to just a little bit on the, the history or the historical ways in which they used the plants. And, I for me, my questions always come back to as, well, how did they know this then? How did they know what they were doing worked then? I mean, was it just a trial and error? Was it something that they realized? I mean, obviously they didn't have the chemistry books in front of them and they didn't have that understanding of what was going on, yet they were still using this process that we use today, correct?
Yeah, basically. Spagyrics, they're one of the earliest chemically based forms of pharmacopoeia. Obviously previous to spagyrics, there were like so many traditions worldwide that existed for, like medicine previous to that. But I mean, if you were to ask me, I think that in general, I think it's like two schools of thought, basically. I think that the way that we approached wisdom and learning was very different back then as to now. I think that there's kind of a staircase that we a bit pass in our modern day culture where you're kind of assumed to have like wisdom really quickly. But really wisdom, it doesn't start at that staircase, right? Like that's kind of the end of the staircase. Really, it starts with like belief or superstition or disbelief.
Sure.
And sitting with that and turning that into observation, experimentation. And then from those observations of experiments that took place, that's when knowledge came into effect. So it might not be that like, let's say that you make a tincture of roses, for example. Roses have like a really finite, they'll change color based on the pH balance of the soil pretty quickly. So like, let's say you make a tincture of roses and one time it's red and another time it's green. You might not know that like that alkalinity of the soil was much higher in the green concentration. But you saw that it happened, which gives way to knowledge. Right. And then you can ask like why and how and where, and you can kind of refine those questions further. And then that's what gives you understanding. And then only when you have understanding do you then have wisdom. So I just think that staircase existed a lot more in the first place.
Interesting.
Yeah. But in general,
it sounds. Well, I would say it sounds like a little bit like exactly how evolution works. Correct. I mean, that we evolve. We have, something that happens. There's with our DNA, there's something that goes on. We have a different trait that comes out, whether that trait is useful or not. If it is useful, then it could continue in the line, right? So it's kind of the same. It's kind of that same approach, right? They would try something, it worked or it didn't work, and if it worked, then that's part of that staircase, right?
Yeah, totally. I think that in general, if looking at like the history of science itself is really just the history of alchemy as well. And alchemists were the first to really call for like refinement and calculation and repeated experiments and recording. And so that just like, it looked different prior to the microscope, after the microscope, like all the ways in which we collected data and understood how things are responding in the body or how you're responding to medicine. It just evolved over time. Like spagyrics are not this like supernatural thing. They're ecological. Yeah.
So for someone who is wanting to work in that and have I guess my question is that how much of the science do they need to know versus how much of the just, the practice versus the science, I guess is what I'm asking. How much of it do they need to know in that?
I think that's a good question. And I think that it kind of pulls a bit on the culture of Western herbalism a little bit more than spagyrics in some way. Like I really do believe that you can make incredible spagyrics in a folk method way in your home that is significantly more based in relationship and healing than someone who's like refined these practices to move really quickly ever could be. And two, like I just call for, like, if you want to enter spagyrics, it's all about curiosity. It's not about hierarchy. And in that way too, it is about humility. Like if someone is calling themselves a laboratory alchemist or a spagyricist, it kind of implies that you know a bit about the chemistry. And so, yeah, like I just, I don't think that everyone's path is going to look the same. I would just hope that if someone is calling themselves that, then they're at least interested in those processes that take place. Yeah.
Well, what about the dangers in it? I mean, are you, with not knowing what you're doing going into it? I mean, I would think that there's going to be some caution that's needed, correct?
Yeah, I would say that with everything, to be honest. I think that there's always a call for caution and humility, no matter what you're stepping into. Working with, when people say spagyrics, it's an umbrella term, but they're often talking about spagyric tinctures. There's so much that can be made with the spagyric process, like magistries, elixirs, ends, stones. Like there's so many different things that you can make. And that comes with like a refinement of skills. But in general, yeah, like if you approach anything in your life, like with ego, I think that you'll learn lessons pretty quickly, or maybe they'll take a long time. But yeah, the same way that you can hurt someone with like a regular botanical tincture, you can do the same thing with a spagyric. So yeah, like the difference is like there's a lot more fire with spagyrics. So yeah, definitely you can burn yourself or burn things down, which can be very dangerous. Or yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and having that understanding that plants are very powerful, it's something we talk about a lot. And being very, very careful with what you do with the plant itself, not only in the sense of like the plant needs to be respected, right? Like we have to have a certain amount of respect for the plant, but also like that your body needs to be respected too. And like what you put into your body, and I think about that and the goal in spagyrics, like what are you trying to get past like just a normal tincture, right? Or a normal approach to herbalism. Does that make sense?
There's so many paths to take with these questions. It's like, it can be difficult to answer all of them in how they present. But in general, like spagyrics, like if you look at plants are these incredible creatures that are so complex. If we break down a bit of phytochemistry, right, you've got like polyphenols and oleoresins and tannins and alkaloids and terpenes and glycosides and polysaccharides, and they're minerals. There's so much in existence in plants. And when you extract a plant in a botanical tincture, you're getting a really, not a small, but not as much as you could in your extraction.
Yeah. Okay.
And when you extract a spagyric, you're using an enhanced extraction method in which you're extracting all parts of that plant. So in that way, you actually really honor the plant as well, in the way that we, take an animal and we use all parts of it. In our Western societies, we kind of forget that to do that with plants, because, we can just buy more. And that's true.
Right.
But you really honor the life of a plant so much more when you also extract the mineral compounds, when you're getting that full spectrum on the scale. I think
that was great. See, that was what I was looking for in the difference between. Thank you for answering that. That was great. Because it's, I want to understand like what this approach, why it differs and how it is better than other approaches.
Yeah, it's you're just getting a much more thorough extract, and your body is responding to it differently. Like, new compounds are synthesized. It's almost hard to compare because they're so different. Like when someone is calling themselves a spagyricist or like a laboratory alchemist, it implies that they understand the nuances of medicine making and where those compounds fall on like a solubility scale. Like, for example, if you make a salve, like you're extracting the lipids, but like you won't get those if you make a tea, and so it's like understanding those differences.
And what about the efficacy? And I'm thinking more in the sense of like, so if you're getting a much more potent medicine, I mean, you have to be careful with that and how you have to adjust how much you're taking, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the dose is often much lower than a regular botanical tincture. I think that's something that's like often misunderstood. I've like had tables at events where I've had like spagyric samples. I've had people come up and just try all like 30 of my extracts on the table at once, like one dropper full, like trying to warn them, like, whoa,
that's the extract approach though, correct? I mean, that's kind of what we do. I see it all the time. People here, they just grab one extract and, even for taste, I see they would grab something and just be like, what does skullcap taste like? And they're like, like, are you even thinking about like what that's going to do? Like, what kind of effect that's going to have on you?
It's an extractive culture. It's not one of relationship. I think Spagyrics really brings it back to relationship, especially because it takes so much longer to make a spagyric unless you have like, really fancy equipment, which you like don't need to make it, but it calls for slow medicine, which is often really special.
So with that, and I know that you're saying that anyone that wants to, do this at home, it's that you can do this, but do you think that it takes a little bit more knowledge as far as herbalism goes? Like maybe you can't just be fresh into herbalism and try this.
Look, I mean, I don't foresee anyone's path in life. I've had some people take like my 16-hour courses that have never taken an herbalism class at all, and like walked away and been like really inspired. And I've had some people, like I think that everyone's path is their own to create, to be honest. I just think that like you're going to make a lot of mistakes. The same way that you're going to make a lot of mistakes as you start to just learn herbalism in general. Right. And it's kind of what you do with those mistakes.
But I think I'm asking only in the power of these plants and the power of this medicine, right? And that like having a little bit more understanding, for instance, if it is skullcap or whatever you're using, having a little bit more understanding of what skullcap can do, the effects it can have on you. And before, you head into this direction and I know there's not, I doubt there's any, and maybe you can answer this. I don't think there's any overdosing in the sense of on this kind of plant, but I can imagine it could have a stronger effect on you.
Yeah, and that's where I just bring it back to relationship every time. And everyone's relationship with plants, with medicine, with herbalism, like that's their own to craft or to mess up or to,
Right.
it's like that's their own in general. I just like, if anyone is interested in spagyrics, I really call for a level of curiosity and humility and not hierarchy, and having the humility to know what you know, but also know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Is really important. I mean, it's a lifelong practice, as herbalism is a lifelong practice.
Would you suggest that they take a class with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. They can find an article online, maybe, or a recipe or something, and again, have no idea what the power of the plant that they are working with and the effects that it can have on you. Right.
Yeah, totally. I think that's kind of a common thing, not even just in spagyrics, but in herbalism in general, where people kind of think they can skirt their teacher, or they use the word like self-taught a lot. And I think that's weird. I think that word is silly, honestly. Like book, someone wrote that book and that person taught you.
Right. I mean, if you want to be a self-taught artist, okay. But I don't know if you want to be a self-taught doctor.
No, I don't think you do. Yeah. It's like, yeah.
That's a little scary. That's really scary. I want to talk a little bit about your approach to relationships with plants, and how you go, and suggestions that you would have for people out there that want to, maybe they're new to herbalism, maybe they've been herbalists for a while, but they really want to learn how to connect with plants in even a deeper understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just such an advocate for the fact that everyone's relationship looks really, really different than mine ever will. And at the end of the day, like, if you want to enter a relationship with the more than human world, it really is about listening more than it is about talking. And I would say that my sound advice to you is that there is a really big difference between like listening to yourself and talking to yourself. And it's the same with plants as well. There's a really big difference of like kind of projecting what you're receiving and then not receiving what you're actually receiving. And one is more egoic than the other.
Yeah.
And I think that if you want to have relationship with the more than human world, you've got to spend time there. You've got to spend time in the more than human world and like the wilderness and like with plants. And yeah, like I do encourage finding teachers that resonate with you in some capacity in that way. Like you don't need to follow their path necessarily, but we're always learning from everyone around us.
Right. Well, my wife often says that college, she's a professor, and she often says that college doesn't necessarily teach you a subject; it teaches you how to learn. And I always think that's really, really important. And going at something, you may, especially with a teacher, and a good teacher will teach you how to learn and how to move forward. And yes, you're going to get a certain amount of knowledge about a subject that you're taking. But I mean, college was so long ago, I don't remember anything from chemistry that I took. And it was like, other than I hated it, not in the sense that it wasn't exciting, but in the sense that I never had the talent for that. Right. And so it was hard. It was really, really hard. But what I did learn from it was the practices, of like being in the lab and learning that sort of thing. And so I was able to take away some of that, but again, it was just learning how to learn. Yeah. So I think that's what is could be important in this. And you keep going back to it of learn from a teacher.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we do that. And I think like collectively, maybe as the subculture of herbalism, we just kind of like throw the word self-taught out because again, it's just kind of based in an egoic, slightly hierarchical way. And really like, I'm learning from everyone around me. Like, are you not? Like, everyone is my teacher. Yeah.
Or everything is your teacher, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you humble yourself? How did you get to that point? Or did you have to humble yourself? I feel like I had to humble myself at one point.
Yeah.
I had to get past my own ego and say, I don't actually know that much about anything.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think I'm still doing it like every day, to be honest with you. But I did spend years hitchhiking around the world. And that was really formative. I was pretty young, and that was a really formative experience for me, to take where I grew up from and the culture in which I was in, and then like immerse myself over and over and over again in people, places, land, plants, food, everything that wasn't at all the way that I knew it to be. So, I mean, that's a formative experience, but wow, humility is a path, right? Like, I'm like, I don't know, maybe someone can remain humble for their whole life, but I imagine it's more like waves, where like maybe last Tuesday I was more humble than I am today. Like,
no, that's very true. That's very true.
It's a practice, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
well,
it's really important.
I find myself, when I do feel like, I've got this all figured out and I'm really good at something, then I think that's the point in which I start searching out something new or someone who's doing it better in that sense. And that's always a humbling, you see it and you're like, oh, wow, that's okay. That kind of grounds you back. Like, and, I'm not saying that you shouldn't believe in yourself, because you should. And you should know that you can do it, but also understand that it's that paradox of learning, right? Where the more you learn, the more you realize there's so much that you don't know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it's like allowing yourself to not know on that staircase of wisdom. I think we come into these conversations all the time, or at least I do, in the realm of Spagyrics, where it's often just something that, I mean, it's in a renaissance period right now, for sure. I think a lot more people have heard the word even 5 years ago than today. And I think that's great. And also, like, it leads to some interesting defensive conversations with people where I think they say, well, I know what that is. And it's like, I've got like a commercial laboratory and I've been doing this years, and like, I am learning so much every single day. Let's learn together,
Yeah. I recently, there's something interesting. I recently read that, there's a curve of people getting their PhD, and there's a curve in that, when they start into the subject, they really think that they know everything. And their knowledge, it's kind of goes that this is what it feels like. They're up at this top. Right. And then about a year or two into it, they realize they know nothing. Yeah. And that's when most people drop out of their PhD program.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Because that's the point which they're like, oh, I can't do this. Like, I know nothing. So they drop all the way back down. But then from there, then it's just this gradual rise back up to this like master level. Right. And so getting past that point, right. You're talking about that in the ego, right. It's just getting past that point of and being able to humble yourself and say, oh, okay, it's okay that I don't know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that way, like, fear is always the first step, isn't it? Like fear of not being good enough, fear that you don't know. It's like, that's always going to be the first step out of ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have a tincture for that? Do you have something that they can? Have some medicine for that?
I've got my allies for sure.
What are your allies? What are your daily allies?
Yeah, I don't have like a daily ally, I would say.
Okay.
I don't like really approach plants in that way. Not that there's like a right or a wrong way. It's just not my way. But calamus is like a really beautiful plant for me. And hawthorn is just like so special, isn't it? I mean, to everyone, right?
So often people mention hawthorn. I'll ask that question, to others, and it's like so often hawthorn is mentioned.
Yeah, hawthorn is really special. But yeah, I mean, calamus, horsetail. I think horsetail is really special. I mean, so many. There's so much to learn from all of them, isn't there? And something interesting in spagyrics too is when you make your salt of plant, basically. So you take the ash and you turn that into a salt. Those salt formations are different. Like every time based on I don't know if it's based on the plant. I'm honestly still trying to figure that out. But
Really?
those crystalline structures
Yeah.
look different in kava as they would to passion flower.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to try to, again, I'm trying to go back to chemistry and there's nothing there. So,
Yeah.
but that is very, very interesting that you are seeing, and obviously you're looking under it in a microscope and you're looking at the differences and you are seeing a different structure for each.
Yeah. I mean, it's all potassium carbonate for the most part.
Right.
But the crystalline structure, when it forms, it is different. And I don't know if that is, maybe someone listening knows and they can let me know, but I don't know if it's different every time or based on the species of the plant, or I imagine it has a lot to do with just the mineral makeup.
And you're able to identify. So if you did skullcap over and over again, you would get the same crystalline sort of.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I'm still learning that.
Oh, okay. I'm curious. I was curious if it's if there is an identifier in that. That's interesting. Huh.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think it depends very much on the soil, the plant, the water. There's so much that goes into that. But it is curious.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about that process? For those that are listening that want to maybe make their own salt?
Yeah, the salt process. Yeah. So it's I mean, one, if you want to make a salt, I just encourage you to go to the ocean, get some water and boil off all that water. There'll be salt there. But also if you do that with tap water, it's the same. But in order to pull a salt, you call it the salt of salt, is the technical alchemical term for it. But to pull that, you have to calcinate your plant down. So you're burning away all the carbon. And so in that way, you're liberating the inorganic bonds into new forms carbonates and oxides. And you want your ash to be really fine, incredibly fine, a lot more than people think. People kind of sometimes have this idea that doing spagyrics is like really luxurious, and like you kind of just like sit by a fire for like a lot of the time unless you have really advanced equipment.
Well, that does sound actually kind of luxurious. So just
what'd you say?
Well, actually just sitting by a fire, this sounds kind of luxurious. So
yeah, it certainly gives you time to think. But yeah, once you burn that down and you like have a good ash, you move into like a dissolution phase, in which you take distilled water, spring water. Some people use hydrosols. Some people use like forms of vinegar. And you basically put that menstruum over the ash. And so all the water soluble mineral components will fall into the water. And then the insoluble in water compounds will stay in the ash. And then you just filter that and then evaporate off the water, and you'll have salt basically. And then there's a folk way to make everything, and then there's like a refined way to make everything. You know, when I first saw like spagyrics itself, like I first saw like plant salts, but the first time I saw spagyrics, people were just putting ash straight into their tincture, which it's not refined, and like you're introducing insoluble compounds into your menstruum that way. And like you can do it that way as well. There are no rules really. And then, to make the salt itself, you can like super saturate your salt. You know, you can use, like people were using rainwater previously. And in rainwater, there's potassium nitrate, and in the ash and the salt itself is potassium carbonate mostly. And putting those two things together, they actually react. And so you're making like a stronger salt when you do that. So like in alchemical preparations, there's a lot of collection of rainwater that takes place. And yeah, that's how you pull a salt basically.
So I guess, okay. So if you do this, if you have the process with one plant versus another plant, and you're breaking it down to such a, at that point, you've really taken out quite a bit, right?
What do you mean taking out?
Well, I'm thinking that you're burning off a lot of carbon, right? And then through the extraction process, you're also anything that's, water soluble, you're removing that. So what are you trying to get to in that formula, or in that process, I should say?
Well, in your tincture, you've pretty much extracted like the organic acids, the polyphenols, the alkaloids, like you've extracted a lot of that in your tincture. And so when you come to make your salt, you're trying to get to the insoluble. A way to explain it is like this, right? So a lot of people really like nettles because nettles has a high iron content. So they might take, a tincture of nettles for the iron content. Iron is not soluble in alcohol. It's just not. And so when you make a spagyric, though, you make it soluble in that. Okay. Yeah. And so it's just a way of medicine making, but you're getting the mineral compounds and the electrolyte signature.
I see.
Yeah.
And are you identifying so for instance, iron, are you identifying these elements that you want to keep? Is that something? So for instance, if you are iron deficient, right? You might say this is the process so you can get the iron out of the plant itself without just, maybe you could just eat the plant, right? You could just like have it fresh or whatever. But
yeah, you can eat it. You can use vinegar. Like there's a lot of different ways to pull it. In the spagyric process, you're pulling all of the constituents together into one extract.
I guess my confusion is though that you are, there are some things that are getting removed, correct?
Yeah, like can you say your question again? Sorry.
Maybe I'm confused about the process itself. I guess what I'm trying to is like, what is the common, or if you're trying to break it down to like this common denominator, right? Or whatever it is what are you looking for?
So you're separating and then you're recombining these things.
Okay.
So it's not like you're isolating these and then you're putting them back together again. So there's no like removing. The only thing you're removing really is like carbon in the burning process. But when you remove the carbon, you're liberating the inorganic bonds. So this is where it's like it gets a bit chemistry heavy, but you're bringing the whole point of spagyrics is to bring everything back together again. Like in the Tri Prima sense, like the sulfur, the spirit, and the body.
And with a normal extract, you're not able to do that because some of the things you're not able to extract. For instance, the iron.
Yeah, or like silica, or there's a lot. Yeah, it's a triple extract as opposed to like a dual or a single extract. So and then there's so much that goes on there. Like new compounds are created, like solubility changes based on the pH balance swinging. There's a lot that goes on in the creation of spagyrics.
Thank you. That's okay. I knew I was going to arrive. I'm just going to take a little longer route.
No, yeah, and that's totally fine. Like, it's a really heavy, it's a big subject at the end of the day.
It's complicated. It's so complex.
Yeah.
And if you really break it down, especially into the chemistry sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, I think people sometimes are a bit like intimidated by it because of those words that are used or how you can get really chemically heavy on it. Yeah. And like you don't have to know these things to do these things, but you certainly have to know these things to teach about these things, I would say.
Right. Yeah. That was a really good explanation, by the way. That was really great. I was glad I finally, And I think it was me not being able to ask the question quite right, because I was trying to process exactly how this all, like what the actual process is. Right. And I'm trying to figure that out. And it's like, but I understand now that in our normal extraction processes that we're leaving out quite a bit.
Yeah, like definitely there are things that are left out. And then, again, like spagyrics, you're creating new compounds that don't exist in the plants. And so that is a big difference. Yeah.
Wow.
You're doing like an acid-base neutralization. Like you're doing a lot of things basically. Yeah.
And the new compounds that you are creating, have you isolated those? Do you know the compounds that you're creating?
Learning more every day, but for an overall arching theme, like, I do know those things and learning it every day. And, at Voura, we're doing a lot to try to produce research. And so sending in for analysis, multiple different rounds of extraction to identify that further. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm so glad that there are people out there like you who are so smart, and so committed, and, so passionate, and are able to do stuff like this because to me, this is, it's so complicated. And, it's like, wow, there are people out there that do understand it, that can help us, those of us who do not understand it.
Yeah, totally. And like, I would just say if anyone does want to understand it, like there are so many great books you can read, definitely, and just like find a teacher that resonates with you.
Well, I think I think that is the key. We had on earlier, is that, finding that teacher, finding someone who can help you along to, when you have those questions, that can answer that.
Yeah, totally.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else? Did we cover everything? I feel like I was hoping with part 2 we were able to, and I felt like we really dug in a lot deeper, especially into the chemistry side of things.
Yeah. I mean, there is always more to say. But I think I'll just end on the fact that like all of these processes that you do to create spagyrics and in medicine making in general, they are all reflected in the earth, right? Yeah. So like earth is really the alchemist. We are just participating. And it's really important to know that. Yeah.
Wow. That's got it all figured out for us.
Yeah. Yeah, she does.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for being on. This was great.
Yeah. Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, and we will talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.